and it's like a tiny baby droid Les Miserables or something. It's a fun callback joke and a good triumphant moment for the good guys, and it's also funny because the droids are like cute and silly looking. And it would be a satisfying comedic payoff to how dismissive all the other characters have been of L3 up until that point.
Okay,
instead
we're
of it
back.
just being like all her friends were jerks to her and then she died. Okay, way number 2, L3 isn't droid rights robot. She's just kind of blasé and snarky, and the droid rights thing is literally never mentioned. Or maybe they could even give her a line about how, like, her relationship with Lando is special because she's smarter than all those other stupid droids. Then, the way she does in the movie, she sarcastically tells the little droid to go start a revolution. She just wants him out of the way, but then he goes and he does that. Then, when she calls Lando and she's like, "I found my calling," it's funny because it's like the first time we've seen her get excited about anything. And we, the audience, feel it with Lando when he seems irritated because it's like, really, this is like the worst time that this could happen? It's weird that in some scenes L3 is all like droid rights, and then in other ones like seems not to care and acts completely different. It's almost like this whole element of L3's personality was added in the reshoots and never successfully rounded out or integrated into the story. But that's ridiculous. It's not like in the scene where they established this for the first time. There are like battle droids that are there in some shots and not in others, and sometimes they'll cut to two characters conversing and there's like an orange glow, so there's no background behind them and they didn't have to put them back on the set, and Clint Howard is there. So anyway, L3 dies and Lando is like really upset about it, and it's played as a super dramatic moment, but that's confusing because Lando always just seemed really annoyed with her, and you never really saw them getting along, and she never did anything right, and she was kind of rude to him and everybody else. It also was a little ghoulish that they did play L3's death completely straight, because then in the very next scene, Lando is making like little quippy, sarcastic remarks directly to L3's dead body. Number 6, explaining things that nobody needed or wanted explained, and then also the explanations are not interesting. The Millennium Falcon has a weird shape, which is what makes it an iconic looking spaceship design. And I swear at some point I read an expanded universe thing that like it's a freighter, so it's like a space forklift. And the reason it's got that notch taken out of it and the little prongs in the front is they're gonna push the crates with the little prongs. It doesn't really make sense because why couldn't it just be like a stick, like a nose? Why wouldn't that get the same job done in the same way? But anyway, in Solo it's revealed that originally it had an escape pod, so the reason it looks like there's a rectangle missing is that there's literally a rectangle missing. This takes me back to the tone thing, because if this was in the context of like a goofy Lord Miller comedy, it would kind of be like, haha, you thought it was an iconic spaceship design and it's just missing a piece. But like it's framed like that's supposed to be this huge revelation, like it's a dramatic moment. You're gonna be like, oh my god, mind blown. I didn't even realize that Han Solo had one specific blaster he used his entire life that had emotional significance to him. I kind of just thought it was like a common model of blaster that he like bought at a store somewhere. Like it's iconic to fans because it's like a space thing that we don't see every day, but I kind of thought within the Star Wars universe that it was just like a basic handgun. But the Solo movie gives us an explanation about how Han Solo got his special blaster, and the backstory is just that Woody Harrelson was like, here, have this blaster. Chewbacca wears that bandolier, and I always just figured it was like a personal preference he developed over time, and I assumed the things on it were like bowcaster bolts for his weapon of choice. I was never like, how did he get that bandolier? But no, Chewbacca also gets the bandolier in this movie, and the backstory of the bandolier is that Woody Harrelson's team was like, here, have this bandolier. I guess he liked it so much that he wore it for the rest of his life. There's this bit of Star Wars lore that the Millennium Falcon is like a temperamental ship to fly because its computer is comprised of 3 different droid brains and they argue with each other sometimes. I always figured that that was meant to like sum up the nature of the maintenance the ship has seen over the years, and the fact that it's like a hack job and repurposed parts, probably a lot of paper clips holding it together. So I was never like, which droid's brains? That's got to have emotional significance, because I always just kind of figured that Han like over time pulled different droid brains out of garbage piles because he's cheap and he needed to fill in gaps in the system. But no, it's L3's brain, so that gets a backstory too. Maybe we'll see the other 2 droid brains in the next 2 installments of the Solo trilogy. I didn't need it explained to me in a prequel how Han ended up calling Chewbacca Chewie, because I just kind of like have lived in the world before, and I understand that if you know someone a while, you might start calling them by a nickname, but the movie had to show Han declaring that he's going to give Chewbacca a nickname. I guess Enfys Nest is supposed to be the leader of like a smaller pre-rebellion that possibly leads to the later proper rebellion. I never felt I needed an explanation of how the rebellion came to be. Like, you know their mission, so what does it matter? Are we gonna get a pre-prequel about a second, even smaller pre-rebellion that inspired Enfys Nest to start her pre-rebellion? I mean, I'm not really kidding. We're probably gonna get a book about that. Number 7, wasting time. I don't mean by this bullet point that the movie was a waste of time. I mean, that's also true, but it wasn't what I mean. But I am saying that within the runtime of this movie, a lot is wasted on pointless stuff. This movie tries to cover so much ground. We have Han's youth on a corrupt planet, car chase action sequence, Han in the army escape action sequence, a train heist action sequence, negotiating with Voss, negotiating with Lando, a hyperfuel stealing action sequence, a space monster action sequence, then a final confrontation with Voss, a Voss fight action sequence, and then a gun standoff with Beckett. There's a whole lot of stuff here. I don't need most of it, and I like even less of it. If it's a prequel and we know where ultimately Han and Lando and Chewie are going to end up, the drama within the story needs to be more character-driven. But we're just not given enough time within the story for the characters to play off each other and have their relationships matter to us. The best explained relationship is Han and Kira, and I feel like that was setting up some interesting groundwork for an eventual sequel, but there just wasn't enough between them in this movie to justify the time spent on it. Even that relationship is told more than it's shown. Like, they talk for 1 second and then it's a car chase. And then when they reunite, like, their reactions aren't even excited enough given the circumstances. Like, this was Han's whole driving motivation for 3 years. He thought she was possibly dead. And then they see each other, they like hug tightly, and then they just relax back into reserved conversation. It's like, I've been more excited to run into old classmates at the grocery store. Han and Lando's like frenemies thing was kind of poorly defined, and they had more time interacting with other characters than each other. And Han and Beckett had even less bonding time, which totally undermined what I thought could have been a really good last standoff scene. So like, why didn't they just borrow some time from all those action sequences and all the time-wasty stuff to just flesh out these relationships a little more and make it good? By the way, all of our time with Val and Rio, I'm counting as wasted time because then they died and they never mattered again. The most egregious action sequence is the space monster escape scene when they're coming back with the hyperfuel, and it's like such an obvious sci-fi concept. It felt very familiar, not particularly engaging, and like loads of lighthearted family adventure movies have these mid-story action scenes that are just filler and that I skip when I rewatch them. I mean, the Rathtar scene in The Force Awakens is like a golden example of this. I thought that scene was so boring that I would use it to refill my popcorn when I rewatched the movie in theaters for the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th times. I kind of just feel like scenes like this are usually mandated by the studio, like they don't want a certain amount of time to elapse without some kind of action sequence to keep the energy up or something. They usually happen in like the first third, and the minuscule impact they have on the plot is that at least they give your new team of characters an opportunity to bond and work together in this kind of environment. Oh, this also applies to that scene in Moana with the coconut men. But the space monster thing in Solo is like weirdly close to the end of the movie. The characters have already bonded as much as they're going to, which is not much. As an audience, you're aware that the characters are on their way to the final confrontation with the bad guy, which is going to actually matter. And this scene is like a bizarre de-escalation from the previous action scene, which just happened, in which one of the major characters died. As a story beat, this makes no sense, and it's where you're like really feeling the runtime dragging. But I know exactly why it's in here. It's because Han Solo doing the Kessel Run is a story in the original series, and this movie they've decided they had to show the Kessel Run, but they didn't have anything interesting to happen on the Kessel Run. The interesting stuff actually all happened right before that, so they just threw in a space monster. Number 8. Solo is a triumph for diversity, and it is fabulous. I am living. There was a lot of talk about how this movie is great because of its diverse casting, but I didn't think that the writing of the characters in question was particularly groundbreaking or even kind. I don't know how #woke it is, but there's a tribe of literal exploited natives and black people who look just like Native Americans on Earth and have an in-story reason that they can't speak and don't have any lines because they decided to write it so that their tongues were cut out, and they need Han Solo to help them. Tandy Newton is a black woman with a major on-screen role in a Star Wars movie, and she was super excited about it. She even, at one of the premieres, wore like a dress with images of other black Star Wars characters' action figures on it. It was really cute, and she seemed so excited, and her excitement was so like infectious, and you just wanted to be happy for her. So I was kind of disappointed to see her character had like 5 lines and no real personality and didn't matter in the plot at all, and then died and wasn't mentioned again. Our other black character, Lando, owns L3, who is a slave and keeps saying that she's upset that she's a slave, and Lando makes fun of him. I just don't know if that counts as great representation. Oh, and in an interview, Lawrence Kasdan's son said that Lando is pansexual, which makes him a fabulous queer icon. OMG, except that this all happened after the movie was already made, and it's not actually textually supported, and it's kind of like he just made it up in an interview because it legit clicks. It's like gay Dumbledore. It's like if Lawrence Kasdan's son said in an interview that even though Emilia Clarke is a white actress, when he wrote Kira, he knew that she was mixed race. And it's not mentioned in the movie, but it is canon that Kira is mixed race. He knows it to be true. There is a scene in the movie where Lando and Han are like just talking to each other normally, and then L3 sarcastically says, "Stop flirting," in order to be rude to them.
No.
Like she's making fun of them or something. Maybe that makes Lando pansexual. And I guess Lando is pansexual for having sex with a robot that's not male or female, even though it is a female robot with a woman's voice and feminine curves. I'm just saying that if that robot who's played by a woman is supposed to be understood by the audience as anything but a woman, and that makes Lando pansexual, then why didn't you just make it C-3PO? What are you afraid of, Kasdan's? Lando also seems to have had sex with Kira, but that doesn't mean anything because every man Kira interacts with seems to have had sex with Kira, and they always have at least one line hinting at it. Thanks, I love it. I guess there was no insinuation that she's had sex with Darth Maul, but I assume they're saving that for the sequel. Number 9, the sequel. Did any of you guys see the remake of The Mummy that came out last year? Probably not. It was supposed to launch Universal's Dark Universe franchise before they canceled it in shame. See, I always figured that the best way to launch a cinematic universe was like to make a really solid first movie that stood on its own and that people liked. And then those people would be like, "Can you please make a sequel?" And you would be like, "Sure, I can, but what do I know?" Instead, in The Mummy, they just crowded out all of the character stuff, all of the story stuff in what was already a pretty sloppy and weak story in order to just shove in as much groundwork as possible for this cinematic universe. It's gonna be big, you guys. There's an entire bizarre interlude where the characters go to Dr. Jekyll's laboratory where he has all these different samples hinting at the other monsters that are going to be brought in for his monster Avengers. Like he has the creature from the Black Lagoons, webbed fingers in a jar, and Igor's shirt, and it's tailored so it would fit around a hunch. I'm making all of these up, I don't actually remember. My point is that Solo reminded me so much of The Mummy 2017. They put in the thing with Enfys Nest, but then don't really explore those characters. They don't resolve the plot with Kira. They have Darth Maul for a sequel tease. And I've heard people say that the reason Darth Maul was in it is that it's not teasing a Solo sequel, it's teasing like the Boba Fett movie or the Obi-Wan movie or something. And the reason that's not true is then why would they keep Kira and have Kira working with Maul? Kira's only interesting as far as she relates to Han. He's the one she has a relationship with. Like, if Kira pops up in an Obi-Wan movie, are you gonna be like, "Oh boy, I can't wait to see how Kira and Obi-Wan play off each other"? Like, no, it only works if they're doing another Solo. So I think wasting time setting up all this stuff instead of strengthening the story that you're working on right now is really putting the cart before the horse. Or, I guess, putting the Arduba sand skiff before the Ronto. Does that make that sentence I said a joke because I put silly Star Wars words in it? So when the monkey did that, it made it a joke. It was a pretty dead crowd. And when he said that line, one man in the audience, like way down in front of me, went, Number 10, what's with all the slaves? You know what I'm saying? This movie had a whole thread going through it about slaves and marginalized groups. And I'm not sure what they were going for with that. Lady Proxima at the beginning, she basically enslaves orphans and runaways by like forcing them into a life of crime in order to get like just enough to survive. It's this weird Oliver Twist-esque operation. And she's a gross slime monster. She's depicted as unambiguously evil. Han demonstrates to us that he's not a good fit for the army because he remarks to his commanding officer that actually the Empire are the savages because they've come onto somebody else's homeworld and are attacking them. I got thrown out of the academy for being too woke. That tribe that Enfys Nest is helping is like a bunch of abused and exploited natives whose lands have been ravaged by people trying to take all their resources. We are meant to sympathize with the tribe, and even Han is won over to their cause. Even Kira isn't a free agent. They have that line about how she's like indebted to Crimson Dawn and she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. And she's even got like a brand looking tattoo indicating that she's kind of owned by them. Then when they're showing up to the mining colony, Lando has that terrible line that sounds like it was added after the fact, where he just says like really unenthusiastically, mining colonies are the worst. But anyway, the use of slaves to mine hyperfuels depicted as an evil practice. And Chewbacca's tribe/family are all slaves, which is framed as tragic. And then you have the droids. L3 is like a social justice droid, which doesn't work at all. Droids are like the house elves in Harry Potter. Like, if they're happy, they're like cute little pets and they just want to work for the humans. It's all good, it's fine. It's a little creepy because they have like human level intelligence and they can talk and have personalities and stuff, but it's fine. They're robots, it's okay. If even one of them starts to express that they don't like that they're slaves and they feel like they're second-class citizens and that makes them unhappy, you basically have to confront the fact that all of your favorite Star Wars characters are complicit in the ownership of slaves. So if L3's activism is played straight, that's weird and bad because of the implications it has for other Star Wars stories. But instead, L3's activism is supposed to be a thing that you mock, which is even more weird and bad. Firstly, because she seems like a straw man that you're supposed to use to, by proxy, make fun of maybe groups in the real world that want equal rights. So that's great for your family picture. But it's even weirder because if L3 has free will and doesn't like being owned, then yeah, you should want to empathize with her. Like, it's not an insignificant issue. She is actually a slave. Lando owns her. He isn't nice to her. He mentions that he wishes he could wipe her memory and delete her personality. And he also apparently has sex with her, which, when paired with the slavery angle, feels not awesome. L3 complains that businesses won't serve her and that they're fighting creatures like her to the death for entertainment. And our main characters huff and roll their eyes. She starts a droid revolution. It's a comedic moment and an inconvenience to the crew. And her writing is so bad. At one point, Lando's like, do you need anything? And she's like, equal rights? Walk, walk. This would be a weird incidental joke in any movie, but it's even weirder in a movie that has the wrongness of slavery as a recurring idea throughout. Like, what are they trying to do? It's almost like this script was written thoughtlessly, like in a patchwork fashion, with multiple creators, and then wasn't edited competently before it was made into a movie and put in theaters. Oh, and by the way, we're supposed to think this is really sweet, that L3's brain is put in the Millennium Falcon so she can live on forever. I don't know, is it a beautiful fate for L3, who hated being owned and not having any agency, that her brain is now permanently trapped in a ship which other people drive around, unable to speak forever? I have no mouth, and I must beep boop. Number 11, the stuff that was good. I just held up 9 fingers like I thought it was the number 11. I liked when Beckett says that Dryden Voss is going to be super mad at him and kill him, and Han says they're going to go talk to him together. It was just like a sweet loyalty moment. It was a good establishing thing for Han's character. I'm here for these moments of friendship. They make me feel very happy. Although it was weird that it was followed by Beckett being like, he doesn't know who you are, you don't have to go with me, because it was just kind of really obviously spelling out what had already been made really clear in the whole conversation prior to the beat about Han saying he would go to. I guess Lawrence Kasdan and his son were worried that I wouldn't understand. There were like 4 good jokes, which I assume were holdovers from the Lord and Miller version. When Han's in the spaceport and he looks over at the Imperial recruitment ad, you can hear under the announcer's voice like a little tinny recording of the Imperial March. And I thought that was funny. Although if the movie is not a screwball comedy and is like a drama that's canon in Star Wars, that becomes really weird. Like imagine if that happened in The Force Awakens. You'd be like, what? I liked the scene where Kira and L3 talk to each other, just taken on its own. It's a funny scene. I liked the one line from Han when he said he learned a maneuver from a pilot before he crashed and died doing this. It's a funny line. Oh, there's a part where Kira puts her hand on Han's shoulder and it's like a show of support from her. But visually it echoed a part in Voss's office when Voss puts a hand on Kira's shoulder, and when he does it, it's like him being overbearing and it's sinister. And I wondered if it was foreshadowing that Kira can't be trusted and she's gonna take Voss's job. And it probably wasn't, but if it was, that's kind of cool. I liked the use of Han shot first. I thought that was the only like pandery bit that felt really natural within the story, and it was a good dramatic beat. I liked the droids in the droid revolution scene. I thought they were very cute designs. Okay, that's it. Number 12. He's named Solo because he's alone. This interaction is so hilarious and how badly it plays out. So Han runs up to the recruitment counter, acting kind of shifty, but trying to sign up and get off the planet and draw as little attention to himself as possible so he doesn't get killed by thugs. The recruiter tells Han that most recruits end up in the infantry, and then Han, for whatever reason, decides to arrogantly tell the recruiter that no, he's gonna be the best pilot in the whole galaxy, which is an odd thing to declare to someone when you're trying to fly under the radar and there are thugs right behind you looking for you. I mean, he said that so that line could be in the trailer. The recruiter asks for Han's name. Han, for some reason, tells him his real name, and then the recruiter asks, Han what? Instead of making up a name, Han stares blankly, which prompts the recruiter to ask, who are your people? I appreciate that he worded this question as unnaturally as possible so it can be a super on-the-nose question about Han's identity. Han says that he has no people, and apparently is unwilling to make up a last name because showing up to the counter with no papers and no last name is the best way to avoid being arrested. So, the recruiter shrugs and goes, Han Solo. Han Solo, you get it? Han Solo. Because he's alone. Solo means alone, and canonically, it has meant that he was alone this whole time. How many other people passed through that gate and got named Solo? Or some other cruel name relating to their personal baggage? Why would that even be the first word that guy thought of? Why not Han Doe? Or Han Smith? Han alone? Han by himself? Han not applicable? Jimmy Scrambles. And Han just decided to keep that name forever and never change it? If your name is not even your real name and it just means that you're alone, aren't you morally obligated to change it when you get married and start a family? And Ben Solo, you mean to tell me that Ben Solo took his father's last name? His mother is a princess, and he inherited his father's last name, Solo, which is not even a real last name and just got made up by some guy at the airport and never changed. I just thought in the world of Star Wars that it was understood that people are named things, like sometimes they're named nouns, and that's just normal in this world. If Han Solo's character name is supposed to be literal, and that's something that characters in this universe are capable of recognizing, who promoted General Grievous? This Grievous guy, he's a good candidate. Why wasn't Darth Vader like, oh, you're naming me the German word for father? That's a bit cruel, actually. Because you just told me that my wife and babies died. That's true, isn't it? That thing that you just told me? Why would you name me father? What does that mean? This entire scene feels like a scene that somebody would make up as a joke to make fun of the idea of making a Han Solo movie. Like if somebody was trying to think of the stupidest, tackiest thing that a Han Solo prequel movie could ever burden us with, they would be like, what if we find out that he's called Solo because he always works solo? And this is exactly what I mean about explaining things that do not need to be explained. How did Han get his name? A guy gave it to him. How did Han get his blaster? A guy gave it to him. How did Han meet Chewie? A guy gave Han to Chewie. The only thing that Han had any agency over was winning the Millennium Falcon in a bet, which happened at the very end, and which we already knew about, and played out exactly the way you would have expected. As for all of Han's other origin stories, it kind of seems like the only reason we didn't know them before is that they weren't interesting enough to bear repeating. This movie doesn't add anything new, meaningful, or interesting to Star Wars, which wouldn't be a problem if it was just like a fun comedy romp, but it's not that either. It's not funny, but it never gets into any interesting drama. It's boring to look at, and it's too long. It's just not worth seeing at all. Like, if you're curious, just wait till it's on Netflix in like 4 months. And I know Star Wars movies inevitably make money, but I hope it underperforms just enough that they don't waste resources on a sequel, and maybe they'll stop doing prequels and we'll like finally get a good anthology movie. So that was my list. And it wasn't actually a list of anything. If you make a really long YouTube video, it helps to put numbers in the middle to trick people into listening to you talk for a really long time. Did it work? Did it break up the monotony? Okay, if you haven't seen Solo yet, seriously, don't see it in theaters. Okay, bye. Thanks for watching, bye.